Although the United States makes up only 5% of the world's population, the U.S. has about 25% of the world's prison population. At the end of 2016, there were about 2.2 million people behind bars in the U.S., a 500% increase over the last 40 years. Though the incarceration rate has been on a downward trajectory since 2008, the U.S. still has the highest incarceration rate in the world. In 2017, the United States incarceration rate was 655 inmates per 100,000 people, which is almost 7% higher than the rate of the next closest country, El Salvador.
The vast majority of Americans today do not feel safe.
Incarceration rates in Western Europe are less than a quarter of the U.S. rate. In England and Wales, there are 142 inmates for every 100,000 people, while France and Germany incarcerate about 102 and 77 people for every 100,000 residents.
Why is our incarceration rate so high compared to other countries? Well, in the 1960s and through the 1980s, crime spiked in the United States, and our response was getting tougher on crime. Policies were enacted that made our criminal justice system very strict. Some changes were that prison time was increasingly required for lesser offenses, time served was significantly increased for violent crimes, and for repeat offenders and drug crimes became more severely punished. Even though our current crime rates have been on the decline for quite some time, most of these old policies are still enacted today. Most studies conclude that rising incarceration rates somewhat reduce crime, but the evidence does not clearly show by how much. A number of studies also finds that crime-reducing effects of incarceration become smaller as the incarceration rate grows. The effect of increases in lengthy prison sentences is modest at best. Because reincarceration rates decline substantially with age, lengthy prison sentences are usually an inefficient approach to preventing crime. The National Institute of Justice reports that over 75% of released inmates are reincarcerated with 5 years of discharge from prison. Why is this happening?
We believe that this high rate of reincarceration is due to the U.S. justice system focusing on punishment rather than on rehabilitation, and due to the harsh conditions of the U.S. prison. The U.S. justice system seems to resort to time in prison even when faced with lower-level crimes and non-violent crimes. This not only increases the prison population, but also can have a huge impact on the life of the imprisoned. Incarceration is strongly correlated with negative social and economic outcomes for former prisoners and their families. People with a criminal record often experience reduced earnings and struggle to find employment after prison. A parent's incarceration and family hardship, including household insecurity and behavioral problems in children, are strongly related. The median European prison population rate is 134 inmates per 100,000 people. In the United States, the rate is about 478 per 100,000. Many state prisons and the Federal Bureau of Prisons operate at or above 100% of their designed capacity. With overcrowding, cells designed for a single inmate often house 2 and sometimes 3 people. Research has found overcrowding, particularly when it persists at high levels, to be associated with a range of poor consequences for health and behavior and an increased risk of suicide. High incarceration rates leads to overpopulated prisons. When prisons are overpopulated, the conditions of prisons are hindered and there are less resources for each prisoner, such as mental health professionals. Without enough resources, inmates are not receiving proper help while in prison and thus cannot rebuild their lives and contribute positively to society once released.
Given the small crime prevention effects of long prison sentences and the possibly high financial, social, and human costs of mass incarceration, federal and state policymakers should revise current criminal justice policies to significantly reduce the rate of incarceration in the United States. In particular, they should re-examine policies regarding lengthy prison sentences. Prisoners that no longer pose a threat to public safety, have taken responsibility for their behaviors, and or have rehabilitated themselves and could be playing a productive role in communities should have their sentences shortened. If this change is made, then the prison population rate is sure to decrease in size, thus making prison conditions much better and safer. This would also save taxpayer dollars, since it costs about $72 a day to incarcerate one prisoner. Policymakers should also re-examine policies regarding mandatory prison sentences. Some minor crimes, such as drug possession, should not lead to incarceration, but instead should lead to other, more beneficial alternatives like drug rehabilitation programs, parole, or community service. These alternatives would not only help the individual, but also the individual's family.
Given that nearly all prisoners are eventually released, reconsideration of the conditions of confinement and programs in prison is urged. We should pay more attention to addressing the need for prisoners to be readjusted to life after release and focusing on reintegration with their families and communities. Rehabilitation programs have shown to decrease the reincarnation rate. Therefore, we should use the money we save from decreasing the prison population to fund these types of programs. If we do not save enough money, we will have to resort to taxes. Although prison rehabilitation programs initially cost money to implement, in the long run we will be saving money since less people will reoffend, and therefore the prison population will decrease. With these changes, we hope that we can prevent more people from going to prison, and for those that do, we want to make sure that they are there to get better and get prepared to enter back into society. If our hopes go as planned, we believe that the incarceration rate of the United States will decrease, and therefore lower class communities, the communities that experience the highest rates of incarceration, will be able to thrive better. If we can help lower class communities thrive more, that means we might also have a shot at decreasing the wealth gap.